Hello friends, thank you so much for joining me for this special video where we're going to be discussing the astrology of Australia. And of course that's very, very interesting at the moment because Australia's been a bit on the world stage lately with the pandemic that's been affecting us and how we've been dealing with it. So it's a very pertinent topic and quite timely that we take a peek at Australia's astrological chart. And to help me do this, I have the beautiful Paula Shaw here with me. Paula is a very, very dear friend, one of my besties, one of my inner circle. And we've known each other for quite a few years. In fact, I got to know Paula just as I was sort of moving into my discovery of astrology phase. And we've kind of almost been on a journey together, actually, with the growth of astrology in our lives, and we've sort of learnt from one another and collaborated with one another and inspired one another all through this journey. So it's been very, very exciting, actually. Paula is a soul guide, and she uses astrology in her work as a tool to help people navigate their life, and she uses it very instinctively. You know, she uses it intuitively mostly. Do you want to, Paula, take the stage? Tell us a little bit about what you do, perhaps.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me on your channel thingy in your world. Yeah, I work with astrology very differently to you. Like, what I love about Ksenia and the way Ksenia works with it is she just knows, she studies, you're my go-to for like, tell me exactly how this works. Like, you're a great teacher. And yeah, I really respect you and the way you are with astrology. And I love watching your interviews. So I feel really honored to be a part of this process with you. I'm really excited to be here. And yes, like you said, I work intuitively with astrology. So I use it as a tool to tune into people and their stories and their lives. And I also love to use astrology as a tool to understand the greatest cycles that we're all moving through collectively. So I also work with people in regular meditations and rituals, but not crazy witchcraft, but, you know, to work in with, like, if Mercury's retrograde or if there's a full moon that's really heavy. So there's something for me that I'm very passionate about with these greater cycles and how they affect me individually, which is why I'm really excited today to talk about this topic with you and how these cycles are affecting this country that we both live in and love.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting that, you know, I'm in Victoria and you're in Queensland, and both of these states have been particularly affected by what's going on at the moment. So, yeah, it's been at the forefront of, well, not only what we've been experiencing ourselves, but also what we've been seeing in our work with people and their concerns and their worries and their fears. So it is, yeah, very, very timely. So we're going to be looking at the chart of Australia here and having a discussion around that. But I need to probably start off by saying that this is not a political video. I don't align myself personally with either party, and Australia is a two-party system basically. There are a couple of others, but, you know, basically it's a two-party system, and I don't align myself with either. I'm probably more aligned with the ideals of Noam Chomsky, if anything. So, you know, please, I just ask people not to leave political comments or, you know, someone's right and someone's wrong and get into all those sorts of arguments. We're just going to be discussing in this video what the astrology has to say about what's going on in Australia at the moment. So thanks for that. We might dive straight in. Oh, and I'll just sort of say also, one of the reasons why I chose to do this video with Paula is because she's part of my soul group, you know, that I revert to for all these sorts of discussions. She's from Australia, so she's got a deep knowledge of what's going on politically in Australia at the moment as well. But I love her take on astrology, and her take on the planets, as she's already alluded to, is very different to mine. And there's so much depth and richness that she always brings to my perspective. And so I'm absolutely thrilled to be looking through this lens at Australia with her. Let me share the screen. Bear with me a second. There we go. So there we are in the corner up here, and there is the chart of Australia. Now we have elected to go with this particular time. We're using the 1st of January 1901, which was when Australia became a federation, and that was in Sydney, Grenfell Park in Sydney, Australia, and it occurred now there's a few varying times that we found online. And so we sort of, there was a chart with 1:35 and then a chart with 1:25, and we looked for the actual time online in Australian website records and, you know, government records. So we couldn't really find the pinpointed exact moment that Australia became a federation. So we're going with this particular chart at 1:25 p.m. And as you can see with the chart at 1:25 p.m., the midheaven is here at 0 degrees of Aquarius. This was the major difference between times, was where the midheaven falls, and that will become important as we go along and discuss this this chart further. But having opened up this chart, we're using the whole sign system. I do need to point that out. So Aries is the first house for people who aren't familiar with whole sign astrology. Aries is the whole first house, and the ascendant falls here at 27 degrees. Taurus is the second, Gemini is the third, and so on around the whole 12 signs. So that's how this is being divided up. And Paula, what do you, in your beautiful use of intuitive astrology, find sticks out to you the most about this particular chart?
Well, I mean, obviously so much, but the one thing, like when I first looked at this chart, I remember what popped was this stellium up in the 9th house in Sagittarius. And, you know, I think, yeah, where Sagittarius is, it's optimism, it's progressive, it's potential, you know, and with all this energy in the 9th house, it's like there's so much opportunity in this country. And, you know, we were seated on Great Hope, the actual Federation of Australia. Great hope, great opportunity. And the other thing that stands out, just like as a snapshot, is Sun conjunct Saturn in Capricorn in the 10th. Like, there's a real stoic seriousness to this. I mean, I could. There's just so much, you know.
Well, I agree.
Yes.
I was just going to say that Australia is known as the lucky country, or it has been known as that over the past century or so. We were the lucky country, and the 9th house is the luckiest house in the horoscope. And not only that, it's Sagittarius. It's a very multicultural type sign, and Australia has sort of, in the last century, really prided itself on its multiculturalism, you know, welcoming of, you know, the Vietnamese community and the Italian community and all different communities after the war. So we've got that multicultural influence from the 9th house, as well as this lucky influence. Jupiter's also there, and Jupiter and Mercury are in close proximity. They're conjunct the galactic center also, which the galactic center is this creative womb of our particular galaxy that we're in, and they're in alignment with that. So there's this creative capacity at a huge level too, with Jupiter being there and Mercury as well. So these are, I agree, we're sort of like this, the potential with this stellium of over 4 planets in the 9th house is that we're a hub of creativity, or potentially the hub of creativity, and there's this great connection to divine energy as well. And I've got to say, Paula, I don't think that Australia has truly realised its divine spirituality yet, but I feel that that's possibly something that will manifest in the next few years, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit later. But that's what I see firstly that leaps out. Our lucky country status is through that.
And also, you know, with Venus sitting up there in the 9th house, you know what it's, you know, the 9th house can be our image to the world. And, you know, typically, I know I'm Australian, so I'm biased, but my travels overseas, people love Australians. Like, there's this, you know, there's a fondness typically for Aussies, you know, like Venus is loving, it's positive, it's you know, in Sagittarius, it's receptive. So yeah, that stands out to me as well.
Yeah, and we do have to be careful whenever you've got, and I'm not saying that everybody with this in their natal chart will have this characteristic, but you do have to be very careful when Jupiter and Venus are in the same sign, because Jupiter expands whatever it's with, and in the ancient system it's considered to be with Venus, even though it's not in a conjunction. And Venus is self-love. And so sometimes you can end up with a bit of narcissism that comes out with a Jupiter-Venus in the same sign, perhaps not so much in the sign of Sagittarius. There might be other signs that are a bit more prone to that being a thing. But, you know, the self-love is expanded. And I don't know about you, but I'm very... well, maybe it's because we've both got a lot of Cancer in our charts, that we have this patriotic love for our country. But a lot of Australians do, you know, they are very proud of being, you know, if you want to use the Mick Dundee stereotype, yeah, that's us, and we're pretty easygoing, and we're laid back, and we're pretty, you know, playful kind of a country, which is very Sagittarian too. But we just do need to be careful, I think, as a country, of that overinflated self-love. You know, watch out for that. But all in all, it's a great stellium there in the ninth house. What do you make of the North Node being in the ninth house there?
Well, you know, we got to bring in that element of ninth house Sagittarius, which is knowledge, higher knowledge, education. You referred to that before around, you know, there's still some evolution that for sure will happen in this country, I feel, with regard to spirituality, spiritual knowledge. You know, that just to bring this in a little bit, the Sun conjunct Saturn in Capricorn is quite a heavy, strong energy that, you know, will be having a big impact on us. I'm just saying some other things, but this quest for more knowledge, quest for understanding, you know, and you bring in the midheaven in Aquarius, which is very much, you know, innovation. There is this potential with the North Node there for this country, for the container that Australia has, to really give us an opportunity to advance ourselves through knowledge, through study, through education. You know, like I know that in Australia, in some of our research, like our universities and our research and development aspects, some of it's incredible. Some amazing innovations have come from this country and the great minds here. And, you know, I just hope that as a nation, we keep emphasizing that, harnessing that aspect in the astrology. Do you see that as well? Do you see that education aspect?
The education aspect, yes, very, very strongly. But one of my teachers, Stephen Forrest, shares that when we have the North Node in the ninth house, that it's hugely karmic, and that's, in this case, it's spirituality that will release us from a lot of our karma as a country. That's what I see with the North Node there, rising up into that. But it's an indicator that we need purpose, and we need meaning and depth to what we do as a country, you know. So we might have this frivolousness that, you know, the Mick Dundee kind of iconic image of Australia, but there is this tremendous need for depth and spirituality as well. You're actually more well researched than I am in fields like, you know, innovation and technology and that sort of thing. Certainly, I mean, I look at some sides of Australia, I don't think we're as progressed as we probably could be, certainly not with our telecommunications industry. And I'll just wait for the internet to drop out for me right now. But, you know, that's one of the problems that we encounter when we've got such a big space and such a low population of people here in Australia, for sure. But yeah, I think
but that wasn't for a lack of ability to create the technology. This might be where that Saturn Sun dynamic comes into play, and it's like, how do these, you know, two frequencies in the essence of this chart, the blueprint of Australia, how do they really interact? You know, like, where does that get a bit weird? I
want to talk about Saturn Sun in just a minute, because obviously that is one of the key things in the Australian chart. I wanted, before I do though, because I want to like focus firstly on the really cool stuff, which I'm hoping, you know, that's what I see that the ninth house is. It's a really cool side of this country, is that ninth house and the potential for great spirituality too. But I also note, and the first house lord, it's always very important to take a look at the first house lord and where the first house lord sits when we're doing a chart analysis. And this is Mars. So one of the other, and I'm not sure how many people around the world watching this know, but one of the sort of images of Australia is to be the little Aussie battler. And you'd be familiar with that term, Paula, that has often the media uses it to describe, you know, the tough Aussie who's out there making his living and doing all that sort of thing. To me, that is a representation of our first house lord, Mars, the battler, sitting in the 6th house, Virgo. And I feel that that's where that kind of ideology is coming from, where first house lord in the 6th, there's going to be a lot of challenges for this country, a lot of obstacles and difficulties to overcome. But whenever we have, and this goes for anyone who's got a malefic planet, first house lord or otherwise, in their 6th house, whenever we've got a malefic planet in a malefic house, it gives us the ability to overcome our difficulties, to win. And Mars is a winner. It likes to win. And so Mars in the 6th house here represents the ability to win over adversity, to win over our enemies, to battle and come out on top. I mean, Mars isn't hugely well dignified in the sign of Virgo, but it does have beautiful support there from the sun, Saturn, which we're going to talk about shortly. But just in a nutshell, the first house lord in the 6th and the malefic planet being in a malefic house represents positivity for Australia to battle through adversity and to come out on top. And we often see this too, you know, the droughts, the floods, the fires that we're known for here, the variances in you know, weather and disasters and things like that occur frequently. We seem to always rise out of those ashes every single time. So I think that's very much our Mars, little Aussie battler imagery there.
But also, like, that's Sagittarius, isn't it? It's like we're going for this, we're positive, there's a way forwards. And also the ascendant, the rising up into more of this Aries, like initiating fire. We can get through this, you know, which is Mars is sitting there, conjunct part of fortune. Like, we really do identify strongly with this Aussie battler, and it can be too much, you know, where we can go the opposite way, where it's the tall poppy syndrome, stay serious, but, you know, like, let's stay there. But honestly, like, to me, I can really see that that fighting spirit, that we will get through this, and we do.
Yeah, we are really that fighter. But one thing I love about fire energy is the creativity, and we've got that stellium in Sag, and we've got the Aries as the rising sign, and you know, the ability to create, to initiate, to take the forward step. I think that's a powerful you know, arrow in our quiver for Australia, you know. And you were talking a moment ago about how innovative we can be, and that comes from midheaven in Aquarius for sure, but it's also part of the way we sort of initiate through our fire energy and create solutions to problems. Certainly that's the first house lord in the 6th as well, creating solutions to problems, looking for ways to fix things, to, you know, find a solution. And I think Australia is, rightly so, as you said, very good at doing that, which is great. But that Saturn, let's talk about it now. The Saturn-Sun conjunction in Capricorn, in the midheaven, that's quite a doozy. I mean, it's got only good aspects to it there, and Saturn's in its own sign. So what do you interpret that as meaning for Australia?
Yeah, well, you know, what is the sun? It's the essence. It's, you know, in the solar system, the sun is shining its light over everything, and it's the frequency. And with sun in the 10th, which is very Capricornian house, it's how we show up in the world. And Saturn is, you know, the ruler of Capricorn. There's a real sense, like, there's so many levels to this. One level is that we can my feeling is like we try very hard to be taken seriously in the world, you know, like, I do see that.
we do, and I've seen that quite a bit. And, you know, it's interesting in the context of how we're perceived. You know, Pluto in the 3rd is, you know, squaring that Mars. Like, Pluto,
the third house is siblings, and, you know, like our brothers and our sisters in the world. It's like there could be real trauma, you know, there, and great transformation with the way we're perceived. And that to me links back up to this Sun Saturn, like trying to be seen as responsible and reliable and solid, and we are, like, I can really see that. There's also, yeah, like there's more elements. I want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I think you're right. Absolutely. I think Sun Saturn in anybody's chart gives a great deal of ambition and a real inner strength as well. Lots of discipline, actually, to be able to get the job done. So I think that they're the strengths of a Saturn-Sun conjunction for sure. But
and it is, isn't it? It's that real hard working, like, again, that link back to the Mars and the sixth, like that's the daily grind also, you know. It's like Australia as a whole is prepared to do the work.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's true. And that beautiful trine that they've got to one another. Yeah, that's powerful. I hadn't seen that. Yeah, the willingness to do the work is the discipline to do the work. That's actually really cool. I like that. But one thing that concerns me with a Sun-Saturn conjunction in the 10th house is the restricted thinking and the rule-oriented society. I've had friends who've, you know, gone and lived overseas for many years and then come back to Australia and gone, oh my God, this place is such a nanny state. We're so regulated. And certainly last year I had the great privilege of going to Bulgaria and Romania, and those beautiful, beautiful countries reminded me of what Australia used to be like when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, and how free it was. You know, I grew up on a farm, and we'd just jump in the back of the ute and go, you know, Dad would drive the ute down the paddock, and we'd be riding along in the back having a great old time. Like, you know, there's no way you could do that these days, you know, something as free and, you know, as that, you know, without getting fined if you were caught, you know. We've certainly become a much more rule, red tape, restriction kind of a society. And I think that's really showing right now with what's going on in Australia and how regulated we've been and how willing Australians are to just, okay, let's toe the line. Let's just fall into line and do what we're told kind of thing, which is very, we can see through this piece of the chart for sure. Did you have anything on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, you come back to Sagittarius and it's law. It's like legislation. And you bring all this energy that's squeezed solidly into Capricorn, Sagittarius. We're going to be like, okay, the laws will help us. You know, we'll just keep creating laws to make sure everybody's looked after. And I think the intentions collectively, again, not getting into politics, but collectively, it's this desire to take care, to provide, to move forwards, to keep going. That Sagittarius, it is the, you know, positivity. We can move this story forwards. Aries, come on, let's go. You know, Mars in the sixth, let's solve the problems. Let's get on top of it. And when you're too focused on solving problems, well, you're winding yourself up into all this structure. Sun, Saturn conjunction, too much structure in the 10th. We've got to get this all sorted and let's be serious. And, you know, and I feel like, you know, you could easily get pulled into that because of that Sagittarius optimism. She'll be right, mate. We'll get this sorted. So we just go. We'll just be loyal to that. There's a lot of loyalty in this as well. And
you're right.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Look, it's interesting. In a natal chart, the 10th house has to do with the father and the father figures. So when we have a Saturn conjunct with the Sun, which is also, they're both authority figures, and Sun is father figures, Saturn is authority figures in the 10th house of authority figures, and the house of the father. What it represents in a natal chart is having had a very strict parent, usually a father figure, although some astrologers interpret this as the house of the mother. So it depends which system of astrology you use. But either way, it's a parental figure who is very strict. And this is interesting to me because our relationship with England has been a very interesting one. And I know there's been a bit of movement about 20, 30 years ago, to become a republic. So, and it's it'll rear its head every now and again, this debate about should Australia become a republic or what have you. And we seem to keep loyalty, as you just described, to our parent country, which was England, so Britain. So it's an interesting dynamic that we have in relation to England and Britain. What's interesting is that I recently shared on my Patreon page a channeling session that I'd had where the entity I was speaking to was talking about the need to change our allegiances in the future as a country. And we might have to be reviewing where our allegiances lie. We'll probably talk a bit about that a little later on in this video. But yeah, the allegiance to England and Britain may actually come up for review as we have a few more Saturn and Pluto transits that are going on. I think that may be on the cards for us as well.
And also our Australia's ascendant, the rising in Aries, what is that all about? Total independence.
Yeah.
Like it's wired into the chart. And, you know, I know you're wanting us to talk about the transits, but Mars is about to retrograde over that degree and fire that up. Like, who are we really? So it'll be interesting to see Australia and, you know, the identity of what Australia is. It's going to be super activated.
Yep, absolutely. I think like Saturn is always karmic. Wherever Saturn is, he's like the god of karma, you know. So his conjunction with the sun, you know, usually that's a calling to be independent in a person's chart, to set appropriate boundaries. In our case here in this position and as a country with the world, we're actually being called karmically to set appropriate boundaries with the world. That means our mother country, England, or with other, you know, trade deals or whatever. It's part of our karma to learn to set appropriate boundaries. You know, any boundaries with the world that are to do with our security, our social status here in Capricorn 10th house, our prosperity. These are the boundaries that we will need to set and probably have been called to set for a number of years. I don't know if we've got them real solid yet, built these appropriate walls, but you know, it's something we need to do with this particular alignment. But the dark side of Saturn Sun conjunction is can be selfish ambition, and I think that's probably something that, you know, we all as individuals, you know, battle with sometimes, you know, the collective good, the personal good. But yeah, certainly we see it in the political frameworks, you know, we're acting in the country's best interest or our own personal best interest, but that comes with the territory of being a politician, I think, a lot of the time in any country. But yeah, there can be Saturn Sun conjunction can actually also represent having walls between authority figures in the 10th house and the people. And because Saturn is walls. So that's also something that, you know, we want to avoid as a country, I think, you know, going down the road of, well, that's them in the political powerhouses, and then there's us, you know, us and them, and really big differentiation with a sort of a wall between us, which we really don't want. And I think Saturn Sun is a conjunction that actually asks us to be flexible. Like, it's not a signature of flexibility, but it's saying we're going to need to be flexible if we want to handle this at the best level, at the highest level. We're going to need to consciously practice flexibility as a nation. Flexibility, you know, consider other differing points of view and new ideas. And I think maybe Australia has the capacity to do that because of this very supportive stellium in the 9th house of different belief systems. So we're very, very lucky to have that stellium there. I think it helps balance out that Saturn Sun for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, the Saturn Sun, like another aspect to that, and it is, you know, it's really, the more we're talking, the more you see this balancing out that Sagittarius and Capricorn. But, you know, like on a more spiritual level, Saturn is the elders, it's tradition. Capricorn as well, it's like the masculine version of Capricorn is patriarchy, and this is very patriarchal signature. like it's loaded. It's, you know, 10th house, sun, father, Saturn, very masculine, very patriarchal. But there's also another aspect to this, and this might be something you're seeing with regard to the cycles and the transits, where there's also a very spiritual aspect of the council of grandmothers and the tradition and the traditional, the lore, LORE, of this land. Now, we're not looking at the seeding of the indigenous people. We don't know that they're thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's ancient.
Don't know what that astrology was. Don't go looking for a birth time for that.
Oh my goodness, no. But we are looking at Australia as a federation, as it currently stands, not making an opinion about this being good or bad, but maybe there's an invitation to connect with the elders of this land, and that could bring so much healing to there's like, you know, I think that you were alluding before to that feminine, that spiritual karma that Stephen Forrest talks about with the North Node in the ninth. Like maybe there's this great potential to connect in, and I know Australia is attempting to address that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not getting into opinions about it, but it has been attempting to go into that dynamic, and that could be extraordinary if we opened up to the council of grandmothers. I know in many indigenous cultures they go to the elder women of the tribe, the council of the grandmothers, because they're not invested in their own agenda, because they know they're on the way out. They're interested in the generations that have the ancestors and the generations to come. Yeah. So no, I don't know. Right. It could be very interesting to see how that plays out, and it's connected to the part of fortune. So, and that's, you know, linking beautifully into the sixth house of the sacred work and sacred service, and Virgo being the priestess in shamanic astrology. You know, that really there's a real call to the sacred that's just sitting here, and you know, well, maybe we need transits to really activate that, which is something I think you're going to talk about more.
Yeah. But in shamanic astrology as well, the 10th house is the legacy we leave for those who come after us, whereas the 4th house is the legacy we inherit from those who've gone before, which is very interesting, you know, the Cancer energy of, you know, the inheritance from those who've gone before. And certainly we have a very rich inheritance, I think, as Australians. We've got the Lord of the 4th house sitting in the 2nd house there, which is resources. Hello, Australia, quite literally has amazing earth resources that are our inheritance as a people who live here. Cancer is the earth and anything buried in the earth, and so is Taurus is the natural world. We have this wonderful natural resource of this beautiful environment, you know, the beaches and the forests and the mountains, and it's a glorious country environmentally, and I think that's a beautiful legacy that we receive. And then Saturn Sun conjunction probably calls us to ask, well, you know, we need to leave, reminds us about the legacy we're going to be passing on. You know, what is this legacy that we're passing on? And it's my hope that we can pass on a beautiful country to those who come after us. What do you make of the Mars Uranus square?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yep.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, Mars and Uranus, I actually have a child who's got this. And what I observe is the Mars-Uranus square gives great energy and great fearlessness. Like my child who's got this, just nothing stops him. He will just jump in and have a go no matter what. It's a bit of a daredevil combination, really. Not that we're all evil Knievels or anything like that, but in Australia, but there is, you've got to be pretty fearless to live in Australia with all these snakes and spiders and everything.
Yes, we are. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's, I don't know, I think there's a bit more in that piece because that's always also squaring Venus So, that can be that whole dynamic with the masculine and the feminine principles, like, that real kind of, what are we actually doing here? Like, I have noticed that a lot of Australian women are quite strong.
Yes.
And
We got the
assertive.
vote before England. I think we were the first country in the world to give women the vote, to be honest.
Well,
I have
that
to
could
double
be like
check that, but
definitely we were early, and that's that Uranus Venus dynamic. It's unconventional, and so the women are quite, I know for myself, growing up and observing this and then living in other countries myself and noticing, we're stronger. Typically, of course, not all Australian women are like this. And that can be that struggle between the masculine and the feminine. But Uranus there and Jupiter's there. It's like, well, let's liberate that. Let's be unconventional. Let's not unconventional in a crazy way, but let's take that, and level it up. Also, like Mars, the masculine being down there in Virgo, there is again like this desire to be in service to the sacred. So to the feminine, to the earth, there is a real potential for that to happen. But again, it's like what transits will really connect that. But I wanted to make a point based on inheritance and what you were talking about before, and that beautiful, what we've inherited, as you were saying, through the fourth. But also the IC, the opposite to the midheaven, is down in the fifth house in Leo.
yeah.
And that's like royalty. Like we come from, the Commonwealth. Like we've inherited that which will have its good and it will have its shadow as well. And then that midheaven being up in Aquarius, again, like the more I look at this, the more I see this intention for Australia to liberate itself into something. I feel like eventually Australia will become very independent. It will break away from its, past, but not necessarily it having to be a negative thing. But I definitely see that struggle. The more we're looking at it so intensely, the more I'm seeing that.
Yeah. Well, Mars square to Uranus is actually an indicator for revolution and taking action around revolution. So, revolutionary attitudes, but it can also incline us to a bit of an uncertain future as well. Things will be uncertain with a Mars square to Uranus. Things will be uncertain future-wise until we learn to manage our actions well, rather than from a place of reactivity or, overly responsive, knee-jerk reactions to things, which we're seeing now. Mars square Aquarius, I mean, it's what's happening now. What is Australia doing with regard to the pandemic? Oh, knee-jerk reaction. Quick, put this in place, put this in place. There's not a lot of observation of what's worked in the rest of the world that's gone on. It's been more, quick, let's just do this. And that's very Mars Uranus. But as time goes on, I feel that the more we are able to act from a place of consciousness about our actions, and maybe that comes with, as a country, getting like maturity, then when we start to act with consciousness about our reactivity and about our actions and responses, then our future will tend to become a bit more not certain, but it just will take like the feeling of, the rug's about to be put out from under us will ease off a bit. That's how I interpret the Mars square to Uranus, which is a very interesting one. But I love your piece about the masculine and feminine, actually, that comes in with that. I'll just pop, this is just an interesting little side note, but because we've got Jupiter, again, I refer to Jupiter and Venus being in the same sign, and Jupiter expands what it touches. And Uranus actually also represents anything that's up high and very tall. it's really interesting to me. When I was a young woman, I did work experience for a few weeks in the Laura Ashley shop. People who are from England may know of the Laura Ashley brand. And because at the time when I was doing work experience, all their clothes came out from England, you know, they were made in England and then delivered to the Australian stores back then. What was really interesting is for the Australian market, the English manufacturers had to add 1 or 2 inches to every dress that they made, because Australian women were generally that much taller than their English counterparts. So just a little tidbit of information there. You know, Venus expands, you know, with Jupiter and Uranus up high, very tall. So I find that's quite an interesting little piece that's only just dawned on me as we've been talking about this. But beautiful. There is a beautiful energy to the feminine side of Australia, and I think a lot of that actually comes from the moon being its exaltation, as well as Venus being in that stellium. I mean, the moon is in its strongest sign, apart from its own sign, Cancer, in the sign of Taurus, and that's really very, very beautiful. It is unaspected, though, as you can see here, and when a planet's unaspected, it's a little bit, well, this could go either way. What could happen here? You know, there's no sort of parameters, and so the feminine side of Australia could, you know, we don't really know. It's a bit more volatile, I guess, with an unaspected moon. But yeah, thanks for pointing out that masculine, feminine. I find that you always bring that component to what we look at together, and it's something that I often overlook, and it's a very, very valuable component of interpretation. So thank you for that. Maybe we want to have a look at the transits now, unless you wanted to add something.
Just one little thing, just the little bit more on the moon in Taurus. You know, the moon, and in this being in the second house, there's this real desire for self-sufficiency. And the more we feel stable as a country, Australia feels stable in its own capacity to access its own industry, resources, knowledge, that will feel really good. And from there, I just keep seeing this desire to be independent, to break away from Big Brother, to find how to be our own eldership. A big invitation to heal with tradition, that spiritual, component there, with Pluto sitting in opposition to Venus, to Uranus, really, I don't know, I think Australia has potential, something really magical to happen. And the midheaven and the transits in a moment, we'll see that's a big point coming this year. And this could be a moment where Australia accesses some really innovative new ways to be with tradition, to be like that Mars, Venus, with Uranus playing out and Jupiter there, the masculine, feminine, like we already, in a way, I can see most Australians, it is flipped. The men can be really more passive and the women are more aggressive, but internally it's the opposite. It works on one level. So it's not traditional, not in the, typical Western tradition of what male female is. So I don't know, they just keep seeing like there's all this potential here. And, I just quickly, like the moon in Taurus, like if we can be really well resourced within ourselves as a nation, that's going to be abundant. And that is then when we could go forth into the world with innovation.
Yeah. And that's that. Yeah. And because it's our fourth house lord, the fourth house is our foundation, what we sit on. And as you've just described, to have a foundation like that is beautiful. And I think that's it might look very sort of just a little sideline there, the moon in Taurus, but it's actually very, very rich because it represents the foundation for this country, what we can really draw from. It's beautiful. Well, let me just get the transits up. Well, wait a second, let it do its little thing. There it is. There we go. So there are the current transits for the 11th of September. So yeah, what is really, really interesting with what's been going on in Australia this year, and we're going to talk about a little bit about that and a little bit about what we are looking forward to, let's say. So one of there's two key transits that I've observed, and Paula, you may have seen other things that you want to talk about, so sing out and we'll chat about them. But the first one is obviously this Saturn transit here. So Saturn's currently around 25 degrees of Capricorn, but back on the 23rd of March through to the 7th of April, he was here, right on our midheaven. And of course, we know what happened in March was the pandemic and the first stage of lockdown that occurred. And as you said before we sort of went into this video, Paula, we're in this cycle now of Saturn and his, certainly in Australia, his connection that has been made to the MC that's here, and it's not over yet. There's going to be the grand conjunction that will occur on our midheaven on the summer solstice here on the 21st of December. So we are building, I feel, right now to this very dynamic conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn that's going to occur at this point. We're in the preparation stages for that, and it began back in March. What do you see from this particular transit? Did you want to talk about that? Because I've got stuff that I can say if you're feeling a little bit stuffed.
It's big. Like Saturn changes the rhythm. It changes the tempo. It changes the beat of our lives. It's connected to our personal hormonal shifts, our, coming of age dynamics. So Saturn hitting the midheaven, we're going to feel that as a nation. Australia will feel a shift in its rhythm, especially in context of the 11th house, which is how the world sees us, the global community. And it's, to get through these times, things need to change for the whole world. Like, that's an observation we can all make. And I feel like for Saturn to happen on our midheaven right at the pandemic, to me, that's saying, hey, Australia, things need to shift. You need to evolve. You need to adapt. And we know politically things are changing quite dramatically with regard to how we show up the midheaven, how we show up in the world.
Yep.
And it's Saturn saying, like you said before, Ksenia, it's karmic. There's a big karmic shift here. And with Saturn natally being conjunct the Sun in Capricorn in the 10th, it's all this how we show up in the world. And it's, it's coming with this restriction. Saturn restricts and limits things. Saturn is the great teacher of, okay, we're going to hold this back and limit this right now. Freedom, movement, Aquarius, innovation and community. We're going to restrict you, but it's not to punish you. It's so you can activate something new, something different. And you've taught me, Ksenia, this is such a beautiful thing you've shared with me so much, because we've talked a lot about Saturn. Yeah. We both have learned to love and appreciate Saturn. And I really love Saturn now. And Saturn, the gifts come after Saturn leaves what it's touching. There'll be great mastery, learning, developments that I feel we will see once this is finished. So next year, I think we're going to see something really different in this country, a really significant shift. Globally, sure, but Australia, I feel, has the great potential to move into a completely new karmic rhythm.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I'm excited actually by it, especially knowing that we've got this grand conjunction, the conjunction of kings, coming up in such a prominent part of our chart. That's just thrilling, actually, to me. It is. But because the MC is so connected with our public image, the image that we're giving, it's fascinating to me that through this pandemic and in this Saturn cycle that we're in, what's the image that's been given off to the world? One of the draconian nature of Saturn coming through. But it's my hope that what it is doing is restructuring our worldly image, midheaven worldly image, how the world perceives us. That's going through a restructuring, and hopefully it can be reborn at the Grand Conjunction was something a bit better than what we've been producing so far this year. But this is interesting because the bushfires that occurred at the beginning of the year in Australia happened just prior to this playing out, this happening. It was sort of when
Ksenia, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That would have been when Saturn was squaring our ascendant.
Yes, yes, it was. It was absolutely. Oh, see, well done. I missed that.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And we had the bushfires, and of course, Saturn is very close to squaring that ascendant point now again.
And sorry, just like there's been a resurgence. There's some aftermath in this country right now regarding those bushfires. Like it's coming back to roost with the koalas in New South Wales, and there's a big political dynamic playing out about clearing land clearing, and how I think it's 71% of, I really should have fact checked this, but 71% I think of the usable land for koalas was destroyed in New South Wales.
That sounds about right from what I saw too. Yeah.
And so now there was discussion in New South Wales of, do we clear more land? And there's a big upheaval right now in New South Wales Parliament that, they're debating this issue at the moment. And that could be that real Saturn squaring Mars, fire, ascendant, solving our problems, 6th house Mars natally. This is potentially, the bushfires, the outcome of that coming back in.
Yeah, good point. What can I just ask? What are they looking to clear land for? Like
it's for mining, and what came through was that there's the debate was, well, of course they're saying it's bringing more infrastructure, we're going to bring jobs, and it's 10 jobs versus the potential extinction of a species. So, some people are not happy about this in New South Wales and in Australia, not happy. So if the bushfires hadn't come in, that issue might not have even been addressed. So it's this karmic, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, all this stuff. It's like, where are you going to really go? How will Australia, even the parts of it, what are you going to really do about this? And Mars is coming back down. It's going to activate all these pieces.
I find that a bit disturbing, actually, and simply because, and I'm not saying I believe this one way or another, but there was a lot of commentary at the time of the bushfires around the fact that a lot of this, what happened was a deliberate move. And at the time it was talked about as a mechanism for creating more development without the red tape and restrictions in those areas that were heavily forested along the South Wales coast. And then when you mentioned the mining, which we know is a big issue here in Australia, the over-mining, the exploitation of Aboriginal sacred sites for the sake of mining, and their lack of regard for the environment here in Australia, the mining industry, it's quite disturbing. It just makes me think, well, maybe it was a deliberate mechanism to give them more leverage without as much red tape to do what they want to do. I find that quite disturbing. Now, I'm not saying that is or is not, but I can't help that process going through my mind as you speak about that.
Well, actually, that's what it was about, allowing things to that's the debate is less red tape, but they've brought in more rules around it, and that's the debate right now.
Well, I don't know what happened there. We were talking about the situation and the fallout from the bushfires. Maybe someone was watching us and decided that they would cut the internet. But anyhow, let's back up. And we were talking about how Saturn made a square to, at the time of the bushfires, was making a square to Australia's ascendant in the Australian chart. So we've discussed a little bit about the Australian experience of the Saturn cycle that we're currently in, and obviously we're coming up to the Grand Conjunction that will be occurring on our midheaven at the end of the year as well, which we talked about. Do you have any thoughts you want to add to what that might bring, Paula?
Well, I want to hear what you referred to it as the conjunction of the kings, or the,
Well,
why?
in ancient times, that when societies were looking for a new king or so forth, they would look for someone born with Jupiter rising is one thing, but also to have this grand conjunction and of Saturn and Jupiter. And certainly there are some theories, and I actually subscribe to this theory, done by a gentleman by the surname of Molnar, who has researched the time of the birth of Christ and put it as sort of 6 BC, and that there was a grand conjunction that was very, very special and very particularly aligned astrologically at that time to represent the birth of Jesus. So it is often correlated, well, it's correlated in that analysis with a very stately birth. And we know that in ancient times they used to look at it as something that heralded a great king, which is why the wise men left Babylon and came to Bethlehem looking for the representation of who had been born under this particular star, so to speak,
Right.
This rare, beautiful star. So, but the grand conjunctions occur every 20 years, and they herald big societal shifts, big changes. Like in 1981, we saw a grand conjunction occur then that sort of brought about neoliberalism and shifted things in that regard for the world. And of course, in 2000, there was another conjunction in the sign of Taurus of these two planets. And I don't know, but apart from the fact there was a whole new millennium, I think that there was, I certainly see through my eyes a very different kind of picture of what was before 2000 and what's been after 2000. It's like I haven't even been able to sort of pinpoint exactly what the difference is, but the energy feels different to me. I don't know about you, if we look at the last 20 years and the change. Perhaps keeping in mind also that in 2001, the world did go through a massive change with terrorism at the forefront, and that shifted around then too, which may have been, because Taurus is safety and security. Yeah, and of course that became, and resource, and that became one of the big issues that the world has been dealing with for the last 20 years, and resources, too. So, and
money. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about, because, I mean, this is, to me, it's, Aquarius is the future. It's at the 0 degree, which is a whole new cycle. It could herald a new way of being in leadership, which is more Aquarian in its essence, which is about equity and the fair, not equal, fairer distribution of wealth, knowledge, power. Knowledge, like the internet. Aquarius rules the internet. This is where we have access at any time to all the knowledge, well, most of the knowledge that's available. To me, this could herald a new beginning, with a shift for Australia specifically from that top-down patriarchal structure system to, you got to be more acting out in the world, 11th house, like your society, your bigger, greater community in this Aquarian way, which it's not, maybe there's an invitation for more of a grassroots with the top down meeting in the middle. Aquarius, like equity, I always use the example with Aquarius that you're sitting at a dinner table, there's 10 people there, you're not going to give everybody the same meal. That's a waste of resources, or somebody's underfed. But fairer distribution of resources means the 40-year-old male will get a bigger meal and the 2-year-old little child will get the right portion. And that's not rocket science. That is not hard. And this is something where I feel innovation, the innovative potential of Australia to pioneer Aries ascendant, pioneer something new, this is a potential for that to be activated in this country big time. And, you know, this could look like, look, I would love to think that, you know, the way we govern changed radically. I don't know, maybe I don't know, but there's certainly a potential for that. I mean, we've been going through this massive evolutionary Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter dynamic in Capricorn, which is a deep transformation around the way we govern, around this breaking down of structures that no longer reflect what the human race is anymore. Now, again, I don't know how deep that's going to go, but for sure we're working from home, technology, more and more across the world. And maybe this midheaven, this conjunction on the Australian midheaven activates something in Australia where they're part of that. Well, let's do it like this. Let's see it a new way.
Yeah. And certainly there's a lot of rumblings amongst the people, because Aquarius is the masses, you know, the
Yes.
hoi polloi, if you want to call them that. And this particular Saturn cycle that we've been in, like I said a moment ago, is building towards the grand conjunction, and the rumblings amongst the people for, well, we're not happy with the way things are. We're not satisfied. And I've been saying for 20 years that we need to do away with the middle tier of our government structure. And that's now being talked about out in the open, thank goodness. You know, everybody's talking about, well, what is the role of states and so on, and how much power should they have, and all of this sort of thing. So I think what's happening now, from my perspective, is that the restructuring is happening, and I think the solidification of it may come when Pluto crosses the midheaven, and that's when we're really going to see the transformation. But Saturn is building something, because Saturn is to build. He is building the change. He is restructuring the hearts and minds of the people. And that certainly might happen with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the MC in the 11th house of the Australian chart, of the people, you know, the Aquarius, the people, the masses. And there's a definite restructuring going on in the hearts and minds of the people of Australia at this time. Maybe I'll switch to another chart, Paula. And this chart is the chart of the same Australian chart that we've been looking at, but the transits, these planets out here, are different. And I've moved to 12th of January 2024, because I wanted to look at this chart where Pluto has moved to be in conjunction with the midheaven of Australia. And you pointed out something very interesting to me as well. Do you want to talk about what that is? Because I find that fascinating, what you've pointed out.
The Uranus conjunct the moon, like a total liberation from the past potential. And also, you know, we know that Uranus has been moving through Taurus, which is rejuvenating our relationship to all things Taurian, which is resources, the earth. It's also finances, you know, wealth, money. Like we're seeing all these cryptocurrencies and new ways of being with money. So I don't know, I think this could be a very interesting time for us to reassess the way we are as a nation with regard to resources, with it breaking. I think there's more to that, and it's interesting with the moon being solo. Is that what you say? Like it's
unaspected?
Unaspected, which is this correct? That can mean that the moon unaspected, it doesn't need to be worked out. It's already worked out. Is that a way to look at it?
Oh, that's not how I work with it. I think but look, I'm not saying that that's not the case. How I've worked with unaspected planets is that they're a bit of wild cards. They're a bit more unpredictable, because when there's a connection to another planet, it's like, well, there's a buffer or there's a boundary. They're sort of held, you know, it's like the term that we use in spiritual circles, to hold space. Well, that other planet is holding space through the connection, whether it's a hard aspect or a beneficial aspect. space is being held. But when there's no space being held, well, it's wild and free. It just does whatever it wants. This is kind of how I work with unaspected planets. So, but I must point out too that I use a 5-degree orb. So the orb is very, very tight here in this chart. So yeah, I'm just looking.
But it's interesting you say that, because that's what it feels like. I'm like, I can't read it. I know it's going to be a significant moment, especially because it's occurring at the same time as Pluto on the midheaven. But I know in personal charts, when I see Uranus and the moon playing out, there is this releasing of the past, releasing often of the mother, or that where did you come from? And so this could be a really interesting dynamic for Australia that's potentially quite unpredictable, which is Uranus. Predicting
doubly
Uranus. Not anymore Uranus and Taurus, money, our relationship to our resources. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, what if we decide we're not going to blow up this country anymore? That could be a massive evolution of revolution. We could have this activation in the midheaven. It's like, let's develop or industry, or let's work with renewable resources. That is really possible in this chart. I'm going to hope for that.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that too. That's really exciting. So who knows? I mean, Uranus is astrologers as well. Maybe astrologers will really get their day in Australia. Fingers crossed.
It's not our own TV channel. Oh, wait,
yes.
That's yours. Yeah.
That's right, we will. I love it. Well, let's look at this Pluto transit to the midheaven, because I think that will tie in with what we've been talking about, actually.
Yeah, totally.
Where shall I start? When I saw this transit was coming within the next couple of years in Australia, and we're talking sort of the late 2023, early 2024, when it begins, I was like, oh, shivers, what's that going to mean for us all? And then I thought, well, instead of sort of having a knee-jerk reaction to Pluto on the midheaven, because then why don't you dig deeper into it? And as I did, I got really excited. I got really positive, because I actually think it's going to mean some good stuff for us. Firstly, it's occurring in, just let me gather my thoughts here for a second, in our 11th house, which is an auspicious house. And it's an Upachaya house. It gets better with age. And if I'm not mistaken, from off the top of my head, I think Pluto is exalted in Aquarius. Let me just double check that. I don't want to give people the wrong information.
Well, while you're checking that,
it is.
Yeah.
Oh. It's exalted in Taurus. So Pluto becomes powerful in Taurus, in Aquarius. Yeah. So, sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh, no, I just noticed that will be sextiling the North Node as well. So big energy. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, it is a big energy. Well, that's very beneficial, actually. So it'll be trining the South Node then if it's sextiling the North Node. So there's a definite, oh, wow, that's karma, because Pluto is our karmic traumas, and the South Node is obviously the past. So Australia's past, I think, may get very brought out into the open, revealed, like Pluto does, to sort of bring out the hidden things, but it'll do it in a way that's easy, because it's a trine, Pluto trine, South Node. It'll do it in a way that's easy, that's that needs to happen, and it's for our greatest good, and very, I think it feels wholesome to me, this Pluto trine, the South Node. So but it'll also affect how we are perceived in the world, because again, Pluto will be conjunct the MC at that time. Wow, that's really, really interesting.
And before it does that, it will have squared the ACDC, the ascendant. So it will have already started that. How do we present in the world?
Well, that could be a little bit more challenging, actually, that square aspect of Pluto. So I think we'll have to sort through some old shit, because Pluto rules that stuff, to get to this point that looks very abundant to me. But with a Pluto on the midheaven, the desire for recognition and worldly recognition is going to be quite intense for us. We might even become a bit, as a country, quite consumed with a new purpose or a new mission that we want to get out there in the world and do something with. That's a signature of Pluto on the midheaven. It's also when Pluto is on the midheaven for anybody who's having this transit, but in this case we're looking at a country. It calls us to contribute to the world in a very powerful way. To exercise our power as a country for the good, especially as Pluto will be in its exaltation for this one. So I find that tremendously exciting, actually. I'm just reverting to my notes, but with this we can become, and in Aquarius we can become very concerned with universal welfare and perhaps helping people in need that can be seen with a Pluto transit to this point. And I think given our karma, which we've been talking about, and our past treatment of, say, asylum seekers and refugees, which hasn't been good, I feel that this energy might sort of get us to level up with regard to how we've done that and dealt with that. Certainly it's a big karmic transit, but in Aquarius and Pluto conjunct NC, we're probably going to adjust how we've done that, how we've helped people in need in the world.
Yeah. And, also that just really takes me to Mars in Virgo. He is the sacred warrior, and that's to me, this real desire to be, like, Australia loves to help other countries, like when it's appropriate. They love that. There's a bit of the savior complex here. Yeah. And, I'll get in there, ascendant in Aries, like, we'll do it, like, let's go for it. So that might be really activated, Ksenia. That could be, that could be really exciting.
I know. I think it looks lovely, actually. And the other thing, of course, is Pluto isn't so like religious or spiritual belief as in Jupiter or Neptune, but it is mystical and it is shamanic and it is alternative spiritual side. And so that could actually start to emerge for us under this energy. So the spiritual people, mystical people could really rise up in this country. And we have a tremendous Indigenous heritage. And you touched on this before, tremendous Indigenous heritage. And there's a lot of, I haven't used the term shamanic applied to Australian Indigenous peoples, but that's essentially what they are doing, similar to, say, people in South America or the Indigenous people of North America. It's the same kind of thing. Their connection to earth, space, land, stories, history, that shamanic side of the people. We might find that there is more honouring under this transit of Pluto of our Indigenous heritage and the shamanic ways, if you like, of our Indigenous people, which I think would be magnificent under this transit. Also good for astrology as well, because Pluto, has this 8th house connection. And of course, astrology is an 8th house practice as well. And here in the 11th house, which is also astrology in the sign of Aquarius, which is also astrology, I'm excited for us who are practicing with this. Uranus conjunct Moon, Pluto, Aquarius, midheaven, it's all looking quite nice.
Time to set up your astrology school, Ksenia. This will be the time.
Yes. Moving along. But yeah, I've just got in my notes here, Australia could become a field of mystical revival and mystical revolution. And I've certainly seen it discussed on a lot of online forums. Oh, there's so many spiritual women in Australia. That's often comes up in the circles that I move in on. And I'm not saying that's not coming from people within Australia. That's coming from people in other countries saying that about Australia. And I find that really, really exciting. We have a lot of very gracious spiritual people in this country. And I think it's going to be activated around this time very beautifully. The other thing that I've got here in my notes about a Pluto transit to the midheaven is that when this happens, there's an ability to move effortlessly through any obstacles and any red tape that comes when Pluto moves through the midheaven. Now, what that might mean, I don't know. I mean, these usually things take a few years to implement, so it's not going to just any changes to our rules and regulations will hopefully have been done with the Saturn transit here that we're looking at. And by the time Pluto gets there, it's going to be a lot easier to navigate rules and regulations and red tape. And kind of we're already seeing this happen, Paula, because you mentioned to me, was it you, I think, mentioned to me just recently about the trade deals that are going on, how Australia is now looking to line up with India and Japan more, and their economic allegiances shifting to these two countries. Now, usually these kind of trade associations and trade deals take years to get through, but they're talking about this particular trade deal with India and Japan being sorted by November, and that's really unusual. That's a massive quickening of a restructuring of economic trade links, moving away from one particular trade link that's dominated us for quite some time to this new one that's happening in, blink of an eye, pretty much.
It's they're talking about that trilateral. So it's trading together and working together as economies. And India is predicted to be the third largest economy in the world by 2030. It's just, India is just growing and growing. And, I've looked on the government website to go, well, what's really going on? And Australia's been chipping away at some of these relationships already for a couple of years. They've been in discussions with Japan. They had a big discussion with Japan this year. It's all documented online, and they're really trying to help Japan sort out things like, Japan is stopping whaling in international waters. So there's some really cool, innovative, developments that are already happening, because Saturn already hit midheaven, as we talked about earlier. So it's heavy, yes, but there's also the openings as well. And to like your point about the spirituality, the only thing I think with Australia, there can be that dogma with Sagittarius, like it's this truth and religion. But I think the saving grace is that Uranus there, conjunct Venus. Like there's an unconventional yet really beautiful, harmonious way that wants to manifest in this country.
Absolutely, it does. It wants to come through. And I think, if there was ever a transit that could bring it forth, it would be these transits of Pluto to the nodes, to the MC, and Uranus to the moon. It's and I feel that's what Saturn is doing. He's doing the preparatory work for this. I think he's reorganizing things in readiness for this big change. And look, when this is all occurring, Saturn's in the 12th house, so restructuring our spiritual side as a nation is what he does. So it really does speak to that for me. Look, we really have the ability under this, I think, to change the status quo like never before. And this includes transforming of the hierarchical structures, and it begins now. It begins now. These things don't often when I do readings, my weekly astro weather reports, I'm looking at the instantaneous energies. Oh, the sun's conjunct this, boom, we'll get this on this day. But when we're looking at these big outer planet movements and their influences to countries or to people, these things are often insidious. They come in time, in waves even. They don't they don't break on the shore and then it's, everything's different. It can come very, very slowly. In fact, I've got a quote here from your teacher and someone who I've learned from as well, Daniel Giamario. I'll just read this. He says, the other side of a Pluto transit, meaning after you've had 3 hits of Pluto, which is what this is going to do. I should give you the date, shouldn't I, for people who are interested. It's the 22nd of January, 2024 to the 21st of February 2024, and then again in July to September 2024, and then November to December 2024. So all 2024 we're getting boom, 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 boom. 3 hits of Pluto. So once we come out the other side of this Pluto transit, Daniel Giamario says the other side of a Pluto transit is usually quite amazing. You get to experience what you've always wanted, so long as you've truly embraced the energy, faced your fears, totally felt your feelings, and incorporated your shadow side. So, this this is what we'll be doing in 2024 here in Australia. It's actually amazing. And maybe our shadow side is to, you know, revolutionize our relationship with England, you know, now that Pluto has moved out of the 10th house of father figures, you know.
That Uranus on the moon.
Yep. And Uranus on the moon, the mother country, you know.
Isn't it? Like, really looking at this, if astrology is any guide, which more and more I'm seeing that it is, especially with regard to these greater cycles, this is inevitable. And also, Ksenia, there's eclipses happening, South Node up in the 9th. So there's a big eclipse cycle, the full moon, I apologize, the new moon solar eclipse at the end of the year will be on Jupiter. So there's some big releasing of these dogmatic, it's got to be like this. There's so much here that's saying, hey.
That's this year, sorry? So I'll just flick back to this year's chart. There we go. That's this year's chart. So we're looking, just so people who are following along. So here's the North Node down here in Gemini, and the South Node is up here. Currently, pretty much in very close proximity to Jupiter at 25 degrees. Sorry. So go on.
We'll move there. So it's really, it's really interesting. It's going to be lots of letting go of those laws, you know, like, I mean, Australia really innovates. It will have to rewrite its constitution, even, like, potentially, you know, what if it did decide to become more independent? I mean, we're going to be looking at that. Australia will look at that, especially, again, with the Mars transit that's playing out, really activating, you know, what is our identity, ascendant me? Mars is, you know, who am I? What are we really about in this country? It's going to come up more and more, especially for the rest of this year. It's big. But yes, sorry, I just was, while you were talking about that big karmic clearing, and then looking at the eclipses hitting that point, you know, it's big.
Well, it's funny that you should say that, you know, and if we did become independent as a country, would that then give us a whole new astrology chart? After having done this sojourn around this particular chart and all that it has to say, I'm like, I don't know if I want a new astrology. I'd rather like this one.
It could be better.
Well, we'll just make sure we don't have not a grand conjunction, outer planet stellium anywhere. I think that's caused all the upheaval this year.
That's Pluto, isn't it? It's rebirth, you know. It's really, Australia will have a rebirth one way or another over the next 3, 4, 5 years. It will look different. The way the world perceives Australia will change. We don't know what that's going to be. Obviously, politics will be a massive part of this. And, you know, it's just, to me, very interesting. There's a lot here that suggests it could be very exciting and innovative and bringing the best of Australia forwards. I really believe that's really possible.
I find it very exciting. So, as has been the analogy all year, a lot of what we're going through at the moment is the birth pangs for this new reality that's about to be born, and we can see how it's coming here in this chart. But I'm excited, and I can hear that in your voice that you're excited too. It's it looks beautiful. So that's about all we want to take time to cover at the moment, but you know, maybe we might get together again at some point in the future, Paula, and talk about other things, because this has been so fun doing this journey through a country's chart with you, and particularly our country, so it's very relevant and pertinent. I hope everyone's enjoyed this. Thank you so much for joining me, Paula, to do this and giving me your time today. I know how busy you are, and that's a great thing to be busy. But yeah, I really appreciate the time out that you've given me for this little chat today. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I'm glad we finally got around to doing it. I think the timing feels right. So thank you, one and all. And I'll say goodbye here, but don't forget to tune in to the other videos that will be coming out this week on my channel. Thank you once again to Paula. If you're interested in knowing more about what Paula does, there will be a link in the description below. Thank you so much, Paula, and thank you, everybody.
Bye.